If ever we come to witness the trial of the people versus Cheney, an astonishing admission this week by the potential defendant, Vice President Dick Cheney, could very well end up as Exhibit A. Our fourth story tonight, war crimes and the slowly growing momentum for investigations that could lead to indictments. An interview with ABC this week in which Mr. Cheney admitted he authorized waterboarding, claiming it is not torture. In a new interview today, he claims it was moral and ethical. Quote, the foremost allegation we had from a moral or an ethical standpoint was to the oath of office we took when we were sworn in on January 20th of 2001 to protect and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. First 7 months don't count. But at least we now know that America's descent into torture was apparently the result of Cheney screwing up his own oath of office, which actually reads, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Mr. Cheney and Mr. Bush thus becoming the Constitution's greatest domestic enemies, having waterboarded, tortured 3 people. In past administrations, waterboarders faced charges and hard time if convicted. As recently as Vietnam, this U.S. soldier was court-martialed and bounced out of the Army. And even then, Governor Bush refused to pardon a sheriff who was in prison for having waterboarded. Last night with Rachel Maddow, Armed Services Committee Chairman Senator Carl Levin discussed Cheney's admission and whether the U.S. will seek justice against those who did the Constitution and America's reputation this injustice.
Do you think there will be prosecutions, and will you argue that there should be?
What I think it is our role to do is to bring out the facts which we have, to state our conclusions which we have, which is where the origin of these techniques began, and then to turn over to the Justice Department of the next administration, because clearly this Justice Department is not willing to take an objective look, to turn over to the next Justice Department all the facts that we can and we have put together and get our report, the rest of it declassified. But then it seems to me it is appropriate that there be an outside commission appointed to take this out of politics, that would have the clear subpoena authority to get to the parts of this which are not yet clear, and that is the role of the CIA. We looked at the role of the Department of Defense, but the role of the CIA has not yet been looked at. And let an outside commission reach the kind of conclusions which then may or may not lead to indictments or to civil action.
Joining us now, one-time Richard Nixon White House counsel John Dean, most recently the author of Broken Government. John, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Have those remarks and or Cheney's changed the landscape at all in this?
Well, I think that the remarks, because of the report that accompanies them from Levin and his committee, as well as Cheney's remarkable statements that are almost bordering on boastful confessions, are certainly creating new interest in whether these should be prosecuted or not. I would be surprised if Cheney really wants to test the law, but he's getting out there pretty close to it. I think most of the people who might be involved are trying to stay below the cover and hope that the statute of limitations, which in this case is about 8 years, will pass and they'll have no criminal exposure.
Well, to that point, why would this be getting that sort of special commission, special prosecutor treatment rather than the incoming Attorney General, Mr. Holder, just sending somebody out to arrest these guys before they leave the Capitol a month from Saturday?
There is a degree of conventional wisdom that suspects that Mr. Obama really doesn't want to take this issue on, that he would rather not have his Department of Justice in the middle of this fight. It's not a unifying sort of move that he might be trying to do. So I think that might be why Senator Levin suggested a commission. But, you know, the problem with a commission, Keith, is it will indeed let the statute of limitations pass. A commission couldn't conceivably determine who might be prosecuted, who might not, because the time would pass, and there'd be no chance of doing that unless they changed the statute itself, which I doubt they'd do.
In addition to which, as we saw with the 9/11 Commission, the people who screwed up, for want of a better term, don't ever want to be identified as screwing up. So we get these bipartisan commissions, and in that case, certainly almost openly dedicated to not pointing fingers. Don't we have to point fingers? Is that not the way justice works to some degree?
Well, a commission is a notorious way to not point fingers. You're correct. And if we don't, if there is no effort to indeed single out who indeed is involved, why they're involved, what they've done, this is going to really reflect terribly on the entire country, not just on the Bush administration, which is engaged in these activities, but it really will reflect on the Obama administration for its refusal to pursue them and prosecute them. So I think there's serious consequences if they refuse to point fingers.
All right, so from the perspective of justice and this more overarching point that you just made about the nation's reputation and I guess some sort of at least political self-respect, which of the various outcomes is both best and most realistic?
I think the best and probably the most realistic would be if Mr. Obama indeed does exactly what he said during the campaign, that he will indeed, when his Attorney General is seated, have him instructed to immediately look and see if these offenses have been committed, if they are prosecutable, because, of course, the Congress has been messing with this law, softening it, adding defenses, redefining torture, but indeed look at it and see what's there, and then report to him and the nation to make it very clear that this is not the policy of the Obama administration or the United States. Anything less is going to leave it in a very fuzzy, cloudy, and probably difficult way for the country.
And after 40 years in this game and around it, what's the most likely outcome?
That is a tough question. Given the fact that the heat he's going to take on Rick Warren, he's going to take an awful lot more heat if he doesn't do something to honor his campaign commitment. So I think there's a possibility he might indeed tell his Attorney General, Mr. Holder, if he gets the nomination confirmed, to proceed and take a look at this.
We will see. John Dean, former White House counsel, columnist, author, always a pleasure to speak with you, my friend. Thank you, sir.